Welcome to Gravitas US Edition. My name is Molly Gambhir. It is 9 p.m. IST, 11:30 a.m. EST, and we are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Right behind me here is the U.S. Capitol building. This is where the Senate and the House of Representatives come together to discuss national policies. This is the seat of American legislature. This is where America's laws are made. This magnificent white dome dominates the Washington, D.C. skyline. The U.S. Capitol design was approved by President George Washington. This was in the year 1793. The construction began shortly after, and over the course of history, this structure has been burnt, rebuilt, it's been restored. Yesterday, the U.S. Capitol Hill witnessed history when the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the joint session of the U.S. Congress for the second time. What did the Prime Minister talk about? Democracy, peace, and Samosa caucus, among other issues. And we are getting you all the highlights of the Prime Minister's address on the show tonight. Also on the show for you, the curious case of the doomed Titan submersible. What led to its catastrophic implosion? We will also look at the big political story brewing right here in Washington, D.C., where the Department of Justice is being accused of trying to go easy on Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Was the White House putting pressure on the Justice Department? Also on the show for you, a key bridge connecting Russia to Crimea is blown up. We are getting you all the details.
There is one behind me who one thing has been clear. Democracy is the spirit that supports equality and dignity. We share a vision of a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific.
That when you give a toast and you don't have any alcohol in your glass, you must do it with your left hand. You think I'm kidding, I'm not.
And let's go straight across to the top story. A striking address to the U.S. Congress, a rousing bipartisan round of applause, and an extravagant state dinner at the White House. Filled with banter, there was chemistry and camaraderie. The last 24 hours have been magical for brand India and for the man of the moment, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I'm not the one saying this, the Western media is saying this. Just have a look at the kind of headlines that they've been carrying. The New York Times is wondering, why is Prime Minister Modi so popular? The Washington Post is talking about how the Prime Minister's visit sends out a big message to China. And The Guardian is calling India a linchpin to American interests. Those are just some of the samples. And they have every reason to say that because this visit so far has been rapturous to say the least. You know, it's highlighted the kind of popularity that Prime Minister Modi enjoys, not just within the Indian diaspora, but also among America's own lawmakers. And this is the focus of our top story tonight. Let me start off with Prime Minister Modi's address to the US Congress. It was a testament to India's growing significance in geopolitics. The speech lasted for about 1 hour, slightly longer than the last address, which was about 45 minutes. This was back in 2016. The Prime Minister spoke on a series of themes, ranging from the Ukraine war to terrorism, women's empowerment, also environmental concerns, and India's democratic values. Let's just take this one at a time. The Prime Minister started off his address by reaching out to the Indian American diaspora and also conveying to America's political leaders the value that they bring to American democracy, including America's Vice President herself, Kamala Harris, who happens to be of Indian origin. He also added that samosa caucus is now the flavor of the house, upon which all the attendees broke into a round of applause. You have to watch this.
There are millions here who have roots in India. Some of them sit proudly in this chamber. And there is one behind me who has made history. I am told that the samosa caucus is now the flavor of the house. I hope it grows and brings the full diversity of Indian cuisine here.
And next, the Prime Minister spoke about politics and polarization. He said while there could be differences within the country, but when it comes to speaking about the nation, we must all speak in one voice.
I am delighted to see you come together today to celebrate the bond between world's two great democracies, India and the United States. There will be and there must be a contest of ideas at home. But we must also come together as one when we speak for our nation.
And the Indian Prime Minister also dwelled on the values of democracy, something which has been making headlines of late. And responding to critics, the Prime Minister said that democracy is a sacred and shared value for both the US and India. He also said it is the spirit that supports equality and dignity. And in the evolution of the democratic spirit, India happens to be the mother of democracy. Listen in.
One thing has been clear. Democracy is the spirit that supports equality and dignity. Democracy is the idea that welcomes debate and discourse. Democracy is the culture that gives wings to thought and expression. India is blessed to have such values from times immemorial. In the evolution of the democratic spirit, India is the mother of democracy.
And next, the Prime Minister took an indirect aim at China. Without taking any names, he said that dark clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific region. And the stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of the India-US partnership.
Our clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific. The stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of our partnership. We share a vision of a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, connected by secure seas, defined by international law, free from domination, and anchored in ASEAN centrality.
And lastly, the Prime Minister spoke about terrorism. He said that there can be no ifs or buts while dealing with terrorism. And in a veiled attack on Pakistan, he sought action against the state sponsors of terrorism.
Terrorism is an enemy of humanity, and there can be no ifs and buts in dealing with it. We must overcome all such forces sponsoring and exporting terror.
Now, these were the 5 big takeaways. Besides this, the Prime Minister also spoke in detail about 75 years of India's independence, India's diversity and respect for all faiths, the scale and magnitude of the Indian economy, and also empowering women to transform the country. Also, the importance of dialogue during conflicts. All of these points evoked multiple standing ovations, applauses, cheers from the American lawmakers. And as the Prime Minister concluded his speech and started walking out to exit the chamber, he was approached by several lawmakers. They were shaking his hand, congratulating him, and getting his autograph on special copies of his speech. Those copies were circulated to the attendees, by the way. It was truly a sight to behold, one that will remain deeply etched in the minds of every Indian. And joining me on the broadcast right this minute with me is Sherry Goodman, Secretary General of the International Military Council on Climate and Security. Sherry, thank you very much for being here with us. Both the Indian Prime Minister and the US President have touched upon the issue of climate change as being a very significant area where the two sides can converge. Also, speaking of the areas as far as defense cooperation goes, what is the potential, according to you, that the India-US partnership has at this point?
This is a very, very important partnership, and I think the sky is the limit. India and the United States are now the two most important global democracies. They have the opportunity to work together on so many important, critical issues, from defense cooperation, climate change, and clean energy. Their cooperation is key to global stability, to deterring China's advances, and to decarbonizing our future and leaving a better world for our children. So cooperation on defense technology, clean energy technology, climate technology as we move to turn the corner on the clean energy transition. All of this is fundamental. And the talent that India brings is exquisite. And the population, you are the most populous country in the world. You have a very large economy, and so your role in all of these areas, and a large military. And I will also say that is, in my capacity, leading the International Military Council on Climate Security, we look forward to deepening our cooperation with the Indian military on defense environmental cooperation.
ISET, or the Initiative on Integrated and Critical Technologies, actually talks about lifting of barriers, and that's the overarching theme as far as this visit also has been concerned. Why is it that the lifting of barriers on that front is so important, and why the US and India are stressing so much on that front?
Well, it's always difficult to transfer critical defense technology, so lifting of barriers becomes very important to increasing cooperation between our two countries, between our industries, across the whole supply chain for defense and for critical materials and for critical minerals as we move into the clean energy transition.
All right, stay with me, Sherry. Also with me on the broadcast at this point is Jessica Stone, who has also been tracking all those developments live here in Washington, D.C. Jessica, it's been a very crucial 24 hours of the Indian Prime Minister's state visit here in the United States. If you can just take us through the takeaways from that bilateral meeting between the two leaders.
Yeah, the bilateral meeting takeaways and really the overall visit takeaways is that we're going to see a future in which the U.S. and India much more closely partner on the strategic side and on the economic side. And in fact, we're already seeing some of the trade barriers between these two countries come down. The U.S. has argued that the U.S. government needs to take down more export controls to tech transfer and tech cooperation with India in particular. And just this morning, we saw that India will withdraw additional customs levied on the U.S. in retaliation for U.S. tariffs. So this is all part of a broadening and deepening of the relationship. You saw a lot of personal warmth between these two leaders throughout the last 24 to 48 hours. And Prime Minister Modi, during his address in Congress, really underscored the point that what's good for India is good for the United States. He called out different American states with respect to job creation that India could provide. He talked about India as a close partner in the context of the Indo-Pacific strategy and security. And he also talked about how the U.S. can benefit from friendshoring, from other goals that the U.S. has. So he really made the case to Congress. He's now today going to be making that case to the Indian diaspora and the American people more broadly. And today is really about strengthening the fabric which underlies the relationship, which is the people-to-people strength of this relationship. The 4.5 million Indians who live in this country. And the U.S. has made a special effort during this visit to speak directly to those H-1B visa holders who have been really frustrated by the difficulties they have in renewing those visas to work in the United States in higher education fields like technology, and even for Indian companies that have locations here in this country. They will now, under a pilot program, be able to renew their visas without going abroad. And that's a huge deal. As I've talked to Indian Americans and Indian nationals here for the visit, they really wanted that. They're anxious to see this pilot be expanded, and that will be a huge takeaway for the Indian worker as we go forward.
Right, so clearly a very productive visit, as the American president also put it. The Indian Prime Minister, Jessica, also yesterday spoke about how the partnership between the two sides is limitless and how the chemistry in their relations is effortless. And we also saw some of that chemistry between the two leaders playing out during that state dinner, where the American president spoke about how the two leaders are teetotalers, and while raising a toast also said without alcohol, it should be done with the left hand. So we saw some candid moments really playing out between the two leaders as well. If you can elaborate for our viewers what really went down during the state dinner.
Well, there was so much mixing and meeting at the state dinner of really prominent Indian Americans who lead technology in particular. I mean, we saw virtually every leader of the technology space invited to this dinner, and then also the policymakers on both the Indian and U.S. side. So while there was a lot of warmth and camaraderie, there was excellent music by Joshua Bell, the violinist and pianist, and also offerings of Indian music in addition. This was an environment that was really curated to make the most of both the social parts of the relationship and potentially bring people together that can forward the relationship with respect to its future in business and in the military and the defense space. There was a lot of warmth between the two leaders, as you saw there. Neither of them drink alcohol, so they have that in common. And of course, the White House went to great lengths to make sure that all of the food preferences of the Indian Americans invited, and in particular Prime Minister Modi, were taken into account with the vegetarian offerings, that portobello mushroom as the main dish, and the Year of the Millet celebrated. I believe Prime Minister Modi noted that last night during his speech, that the Year of the Millet is being celebrated by India, being initiated by India, and is being celebrated and was celebrated through the offerings of the state dinner as well.
Jessica Stone getting us all those updates from Washington, D.C. Thanks very much for the moment. Sherry, I want to just come back to you to talk about the partnership between India and the United States. We've seen some very significant takeaways coming in. A number of defense announcements as anticipated, the sharing of technology that has been underpinning this entire visit. What is the message that the United States is trying to send out to India through this state visit and through this closer cooperation as well?
The message is that India is a critical strategic partner for the United States across all core components of society, particularly in defense, and that is extremely important. That's a barrier to prior cooperation that's just in the last few years been lifted and really strengthened in this visit. It includes critical technologies, and it also includes science and technology cooperation. Both India and the United States probably have the most robust science and technology capacities in the world. And, Indians are throughout American universities. Americans are in India all the time. And so the collaboration has already deepened over the last couple decades, but now we see the full fruition of it. And the possibilities are just exponential to really improve the quality of life for people in both countries and around the world, both through defense, environmental, climate, clean energy, space, many other areas of critical technology and science and engineering cooperation.
Sherry Goodman, it's a pleasure speaking to you, and thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure, and thank you. As an American, I have just always so valued the Indian partnership, and I have seen how enthusiastic Americans are about our deepening country ties. Just as an example, Indian-American weddings are now increasingly common, and I see many of my young family members who are so excited to be partaking in these. So the cultural connections are deepening every day with every moment.
Absolutely, and which is why the people-to-people ties have also been a very crucial element of the Indian Prime Minister's state visit, and the enthusiasm, of course, has been palpable here on the ground. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the White House rolled out a red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A host of dignitaries, eminent figures gathered for that colourful ceremony. Indian accented delicacies were served with an American bent, and there was also a special toast. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden raised their glasses to their friendship and strengthening the India-US relationship. Our next report telling you more about the personal chemistry that the two leaders share, and which was also out on full display.
Toast to our partnership, to our people, to the possibilities that lie ahead, to two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
Two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers, said US President Joe Biden, to which Prime Minister Modi replied. You are soft-spoken, but when it comes to action, you are very strong.
बोलने में सॉफ्ट है, पर एक्शन में पूरी तरह स्ट्रांग है.
Both the leaders don't drink alcohol, so they toasted India and America's deepening friendship with ginger ale. One of them is a blue-collar's son, another one the son of a tea seller.
Enjoy your meal.
Life has not been easy for either of the two leaders, but now they are leading two of the most powerful economies of the world. Last month, they met in Hiroshima during the G7 summit. Both shared a hug and exchanged warm greetings. Biden was filled with praises for Prime Minister Modi. He said, and I quote, "You also made a fundamental shift in climate. You have influence in Indo-Pacific. You are making a difference." He also jokingly asked for his autograph, saying, "You are causing me a real problem. Next month we have a dinner for you in Washington." Everyone in the whole country wants to come. I have run out of tickets. You think I'm kidding? Ask my team. I'm getting phone calls from people I have never heard of before. Everyone from movie actors to relatives. You are too popular. When Prime Minister Modi last visited Washington back in September 2021, both the leaders shared a hearty banter. President Biden recalled how he had come across people with the same surname in Mumbai. Prime Minister Modi joked that he had brought along documents proving that they are related to Joe Biden. Such is the dynamic between the two leaders, and it is reflecting in India-US ties. The Modi-Biden bonhomie is boosting India-US strategic proximity. President Biden is going beyond the usual protocol. He is going the extra mile to extend a touch of personal warmth to Prime Minister Modi's visit. You see, India and the US are not formal treaty-bound allies. India has long relished its independence, but US looks at India as a strategic counterweight to China. It is opening up its high-tech sector to India. It is now willing to share its state-of-the-art technology with joint production, from military jet engines to space collaboration, resilient supply chains, expanding business ties, and smoother visa facilities. Everything is on the table. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
So apart from that personal chemistry between the two leaders that we saw playing out, a series of takeaways from that bilateral meeting, also from the Indian Prime Minister's address to the joint session of the US Congress and his meetings that have been underway with business delegates as well. To dissect the developments that have panned out already at this point, with me is Daniel Davis, who has been observing American policy very closely, specifically at a time like this when America and India are coming together to forge deeper and closer ties on various fronts. Why is there a growing sense in America when it comes to India's support to counter China? Why does America need India to strike that balance and counter China?
You know, I think that the main reason is because of how India has played their hand, because they're one of the biggest growing powers in the world, and they have, frankly, deftly handled all the diplomatic and economic issues when they're in a very difficult neighborhood, both with China, with Russia, with the United States, with other nations in ASEAN. They have really done a great job at maintaining that balance, maybe uniquely, maybe better than China, but the United States or Russia independently. And so I think that they have carved out to show over time that they are somebody that can be counted on, but also that you can't take for granted. And so we have to court them a little bit more heavily than we have before. And now I think that you're seeing the payoff for that. The president himself said that this was the most consequential meeting that we've had in history with India. So this really, I think, elevates what's been going on.
Lifting of barriers as far as sharing of technology is concerned, also ISET, specifically the GE deal to jointly manufacture fighter jet engines. Right. What makes this deal so significant and unique, according to you? Well,
you know, I think that you don't have to look further than our NATO ally, Turkey, when they were going to get, say, for example, the S-400 systems.
Right.
And it was a big row, and we didn't want to let them get the F-35s. And then now that you see that India has the S-400s, and yet we're still going to make this new issue with the jet engines, because that just shows how India's handling something better than one of our actual treaty allies. And so I think that in that regard, that shows that that really illustrates just how deep the relationship is growing and how important the United States sees India right now.
What do you make of the terms that have been used by the two leaders to actually describe this relationship? We've also seen a greater warmth in their relationship over the past few years. But in terms of establishing and sending out a message to China and the emphasis on a free and open Indo-Pacific, we saw that being mentioned by the two leaders as well, very significantly.
Right, and I actually was really impressed in the Prime Minister's address before the joint session of Congress yesterday, to where he was, really talking about we need to have peace. We need to not solve issues with military power and threats, but with other things. And that's, of course, one of the things I'm most adamant about, that we need to follow India's example in that regard, because, we've been too much solid, especially since 9/11, we've been kind of stuck on the whole military angle of it. And so I'd like to see us follow a little bit more of India's example and go more diplomacy and into economic issues and win-win kind of options. And if we follow that path, I think it's good for both countries.
Also, the very fact that the U.S. president wants to wean the U.S. supply chains off from China, also trying to wean New Delhi's military away from Russia. To what extent do you think there will be immediate challenges on that front?
Well, everybody likes things to be a zero-sum game. And so China won't want to lose any influence it has. Russia won't want to lose any influence it has. But again, I think that goes back to showing the unique position that India has right now in the world, in that they can kind of balance off on that. Yes, we would like them to wean off of Russia for military spies, but India has 50% of their military equipment comes from Russia. So you're not going to really wean that off. It would be too hard to do. So we want to try to just move them in the other direction. But India's only going to go so far, because they're going to look after their own national interests first, and they like to help us out. They want to keep us close, but maybe not too close.
We're leaving it there for the moment, Daniel. Thanks very much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, if you keep the lavish honors, the gestures of goodwill aside, as far as the future of India's relationship with the US is concerned, there is one significant aspect here, as we were just discussing. We are talking about China, and many believe that China is the glue that is bringing India and the US closer, simply because both the countries are on a collision course with Beijing. So in many ways, Beijing has become the fundamental driver of this growing partnership, and it has only itself to blame. Its expansionist agenda, its aggressive diplomacy, its muscle flexing in the Indo-Pacific, also its disregard for territorial sovereignty, and its disrespect of international norms. All of them have brought the world's two biggest democracies together on a mission, and that mission is to tame the dragon. Look at the statements. This is the joint communique issued by India and the United States, and the document categorically mentions South and East China Sea. These are regions where China's belligerence is at its peak. Let me just quote the exact paragraph. It says, both sides emphasize the importance of adherence to international law, particularly as reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and the maintenance of freedom of navigation and overflight in addressing challenges to the maritime rules-based order, including in the East and South China Seas. And the message here is very simple. China's bullying in these regions will not be tolerated, and a US-India partnership is crucial to ensure that it is not. In simple words, the aim is to build out an extended framework of deterrence to try and keep China in check, and it is this geopolitical alignment over China which is leading to an unprecedented flourishing of security and defense cooperation between the two sides. And if we speak of the Himalayas, there has been increased intelligence sharing, also joint military exercises close to the China border. Prime Minister Modi's US visit is further expected to yield several defense deals for surveillance technology and drones. India has also embraced Washington's new willingness to share its advanced technology, also cyber resources, especially given the technological advancements in China. And at the same time, India has also closed a landmark deal allowing US giant General Electric to jointly produce jet engines in India. And this deal will power Indian military aircraft, like we were just discussing. It will also be the first time that such a collaboration on military technology has taken place, sending out a clear message to China. And from America's perspective, the Indian Prime Minister's visit comes at a time when China is provoking America as well. For instance, there is an ongoing feud over a Chinese spy balloon which was spotted over America's skies earlier this year. And this feud has been reignited by President Biden, publicly branding Xi Jinping as a dictator. And this only goes on to show why India's growing strategic weight could be so valuable to the United States. Simply put, it's a win-win scenario for both the sides. And there was one attendee of that state dinner who caught everyone's attention. We're talking about US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Days ago, he made news headlines. Hunter Biden is set to plead guilty to 2 tax, misdemeanor and gun charges. But the controversy did not keep him away from the state dinner. He was there and he seemed to be having a good time. This was just another display of support from his father, Joe Biden. The Justice Department has been investigating Hunter Biden's personal and business dealings for years now, but his father has made little attempt to distance himself from his son. And now come other sensational claims from Internal Revenue Service or IRS whistleblowers. Republicans have released their testimony. The whistleblowers are saying that the Department of Justice interfered with the probe, and they further claim IRS investigators recommended charging Hunter Biden with attempted tax evasion and filing a false tax return. Now note here, both of these are far more serious crimes than Hunter Biden has agreed to plead guilty to. They are felonies, and the IRS has suggested 11 counts of them. And this reportedly had the backing of some Justice Department prosecutors, but not all. And senior attorneys were not on board with the felony charges. The allegations come from Gary Shapley, a 14-year IRS veteran and another one who has been tracking the developments since the very beginning. Shapley told the lawmakers, and I quote, "I'm alleging with evidence that DOJ provided preferential treatment, slow-walked the investigation, did nothing to avoid the obvious conflicts of interest in this investigation." Now, these papers quoted texts that Hunter Biden had allegedly sent to a Chinese fund management company. They said, and I'm quoting, "I'm sitting here with my father and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand." And now means tonight. What does the text mean? It means that Hunter Biden was stuck in a mess of his own making, and he was trying to his dad's position, trying to use his dad's position to get out of that mess. But guess what? The Justice Department prosecutors decided to look the other way. They refused to take these texts into account while investigating Hunter Biden. At least that is what the whistleblowers are claiming at this point. According to them, the Justice Department attorney discouraged the FBI from directly asking about Joe Biden when interviewing the witnesses. Hunter Biden has made millions of dollars from China, Ukraine, and other countries. Joe Biden has repeatedly denied any involvement. But the House Republicans have also slammed Hunter Biden's plea deal as a sweetheart deal and said that it amounted to a slap on the wrist. The Republicans are aggressively claiming that the Justice Department gave preferential treatment to Hunter Biden. But is that really true? Is the White House interfering with the Biden case? And shifting our focus to what was one of the most elaborate search operations in history. The search for the Titanic submarine has now come to a close, and rescuers have found the submarine debris just a few hundred meters from the Titanic wreck. American Coast Guard has declared the death of the passengers and has offered condolences. But what is the whole picture behind the submarine's collapse? Is the submarine company going to be penalized for this? Let's get you all the details. In the latest, the US Navy has announced that it heard an acoustic anomaly consistent with an implosion, quote unquote. What does that mean? Basically, they heard the submarine collapsing. And when did the Navy hear this? It was moments after the submarine began its descent on Sunday. And why did the officials not release this information before? What made them hold back such crucial information? Although the precise details of the search operations are still classified, the White House has offered its condolences to the families of the deceased. The families have also posted messages on social media. They have thanked the officials for their international rescue efforts. And who were the 5 men in the vessel? A 58-year-old British billionaire businessman, Hamish Harding. 48-year-old British Pakistani businessman, Shehzada Dawood. His 18-year-old son, Suleiman Dawood. A 77-year-old French diver, Paul-Henri Nagelep, and 61-year-old Stockton Rush, who was the CEO of OceanGate. So So at which point did the rescuers actually lose hope? It may have been the discovery of the debris. That was when the officials realized that a catastrophic implosion had taken place. And rescuers found the debris less than 500 meters from the Titanic wreck. And which parts of the submarine did they actually find? They discovered the tail cone, 2 broken ends of the pressure hull, the landing frame, and the porthole window.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families.
So what were the noises that the US Navy picked up earlier? Well, it turns out that they were coming from other vessels. And the leader of the search operation, Rear Admiral John Mauger, has said that there was no relation between the noises and the location of the debris field. In fact, experts are now explaining what could have caused the implosion. You see, the deeper you go, the more water you have pressing down on you, no matter how strong a vessel is. And experts say that even a small weakening of the outer hull can actually cause destruction. And this is certainly possible as the pressure down there is 300 times more than on land, 300 times. How is the world reacting to what has happened? Some are expressing their grief, but there are people who are criticizing the American Navy. Some are slamming the submarine company, Ocean Gate, and some are judging the media coverage of the disaster. Listen in.
I think it's a tragedy, as any tragedy, but I think it was highlighted because basically there was a certain group of people that chose to go on that trip.
I think it's very sad with the technology that we have today. They should have found those people. They should have brought them up, you know.
It's a sad situation all around. The Titanic has taken 5 more souls and it's a wreck.
Hollywood director James Cameron has called out Ocean Gate. He said that the submergence community was concerned about Ocean Gate's vehicle. Also compared Titan's tragedy to the loss of the Titanic itself, calling it a terrible irony.
So Ocean Gate shouldn't have been doing what it was doing. I think that's pretty clear. I wish I had been more vocal about that, but I think I was unaware that they weren't certified. Because I wasn't really studying it. I wasn't really interested.
And on the other hand, a co-founder of Ocean Gate, Guillermo Sonlen, has rejected all the criticism. In fact, he said that people commenting on Titan safety, including James Cameron, are not fully informed. The co-founder said that a passenger always runs the risk of that kind of an implosion happening. But is that answer even justified? And should a tour of the Titanic be a game of life and death? Will Ocean Gate face any charges? We will be tracking all those developments. And we are now shifting our focus to the latest in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine has now attacked 2 bridges that link, in fact, these attacks have taken place. Russia has attacked 2 bridges that link, in the latest that's coming in, Ukraine has attacked 2 bridges that link southern Ukraine to the Crimean Peninsula. Should officials say that long-range British missiles were used? You see, the Chonha Bridge provides the shortest route from Crimea to the front line in the south. And how is this attack going to affect the Russian forces? And how does Russia plan to fight back? Let's get to the details. Let's just tell you a little about the Chonha Bridge, or as the Russians call it, the Chongar Bridge. It is one of the handful of links between Crimea and mainland Ukraine. And that is the reason it's also known as the Gate to Crimea. Let's just remind you, Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014, and in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine's southern coastal region as well. Ukrainian military spokeswoman Natalia Humeniuk said that Ukraine aims to disrupt Russian supply routes. She said that there will be more similar attacks. And how has Russia responded to the attack? The Russian-installed governor of Kherson, Vladimir Saldo, threatened to target a bridge which links Moldova with Romania. Romania and Moldova saying that the comment is unacceptable. And how has Russia responded to the attack? The Russian-installed governor of Kherson, Vladimir Saldo, threatened to target a bridge which links Moldova with Romania. Romania and Moldova saying that the comment is unacceptable. You see, Ukraine has a history of bombing Russian-controlled bridges. Last year, Kiev repeatedly attacked the Antonivsky Bridge to stop Russia from bringing supplies from Crimea. And in October, a bridge across the Kerch Strait was attacked. Ukraine's attack was called act of terrorism by President Vladimir Putin. So what is the status of Ukraine's counteroffensive? Its troops have made slow progress in the south and the east, and the campaign slowed down when the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed earlier this month. And several areas were flooded, multiple farms were ruined, dozens of lives were lost. Managing the tragedy affected Ukraine's counteroffensive. And on the other side, Russia is showing no signs of slowing down. Forces are targeting Crimea, which is the home city of the President Volodymyr Zelensky. And Moscow is also conducting attacks on the southern port of Odessa. President Zelensky saying that Russia is now preparing the scenario of a terrorist attack. An attack on what, you ask? The Zaporizhia nuclear plant. Let's just remind you, this is the biggest nuclear plant in Europe. Zelensky has warned that radiation has no state borders, so the destruction will be massive. And how has Russia reacted? It has rejected Volodymyr Zelensky's claim. Moscow has called his comments as, quote-unquote, another lie. And what is the current condition of the Zaporizhia plant? Although the nuclear plant's 6 reactors have been shut down, the UN Atomic Energy Agency says that the safety situation is extremely fragile. You see, certain water levels are used to cool the heated reactors, but since the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed, there is minimal water to cool the reactors, which has made the situation tense. And will the Russian forces actually attack the nuclear plant is the question. Would Ukraine be able to speed up its counteroffensive? We will be keeping a close eye on all of those updates. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition, Gravitas US Edition, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. As we say goodbye, we're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Get ready, 8-4 down. Whoa.